the times where I have been at my lowest and where truly I haven't wanted to get out of bed, and the panic attacks just kind of roll in one after another like waves hitting a beach. Um, it is a very, very challenging and in some respects courageous decision to face that, to look at it, and to start deciding that I don't want to feel that way and I don't want to give in to the adversity. And the more I've practiced that approach, the more familiar it becomes. So I haven't been in that dark hole ever again.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte, identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles so that you can claim your own path and make your life a work of art. Welcome, everybody, to Way of the Artist podcast. We got another one coming at you today. And this one, I think I've said this a number of times, but it always feels like this. This one seems like it's been a long time coming. Wouldn't you agree, Brandon?
I would agree.
You would agree. Very much. All right. Took you a while to respond to that, but yes, you would agree. We've got a wonderful guest on today. We've got Karin Pasqua. I didn't say that quite correctly, but I just have to say that name strangely every single time. But we've got Karin Pasqua on the show today, and Karin is an accessibility and universal design specialist. We'll get into what that all means, with a deep love of beautiful and functional design that includes everyone. She describes herself as part engineer and part occupational therapist who focuses her creativity on solving what others perceive to be design barriers or problems. Karin, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. Excited to be here with you both.
And I just want to say, like, in addition to all of those things that I've said, there's a number of other things in not just like, because we have a personal relationship. We're friends. We've known each other for a long time. But
you could say that.
Yeah. And I've known you in a lot of different roles in a professional sense. Because when I first met you, you were, and I'm probably going to butcher what you actually were, your title, but you worked with communication, correct? Like you were working with kids with learning disabilities and helping them learn how to speak, and helping parents,
Sure.
who have young kids learning to speak. And then you went from doing that to working with nonprofit organizations, creating events, like massive events for huge organizations like Variety. You were with Canucks Place as well for a long time. Canucks Place?
Canucks Place, yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yep. You're good.
Throwing events, like fundraising, giant events, bringing together like just big people, and now you're a design specialist. You're helping to create spaces and environments that are inclusive for people in all kinds of different ways, not just physical spaces, but like spaces like this one, online spaces, all like you've worn so many different hats. And I think that might be the perfect place to start with this conversation, is your ability to adapt, to pivot, and to figure it out, which is, I know, is something that you are very proud of as like a quality that you have, is your ability to just figure it out. What do you have to say about everything I just said?
I think you capture it very well. in many respects, I see them all connected, and every career path I've taken has kind of led me to the next step. And there is a vein that goes through everything that is very consistent. But at one point, you're absolutely right. My resume could have just been wiped clean, could have been a single page, and said, I can figure it out. End of story. And yeah, I do take a lot of pride in that feature, and in many respects, part of why I changed roles as frequently as I did is once I got good at something and I couldn't find areas to improve it and add value to the situation, I got bored. And I needed to find a new avenue to challenge myself and to I ultimately ignite creativity. Because if I'm doing the same thing consistently over and over, then there's no opportunity to make something new and shiny and better and add a new lens to it. So with I think we have a saying amongst all of us at New Year's, to the next step. And in many respects, right? I know that's been part of your vocabulary for longer than we've known each other. But this idea is that kind of once I feel as though I've mastered something, I don't feel as though I have as much to contribute. And when that creativity wanes, is where I feel the need to move on and make a bigger impact. And I think all of those steps have been leading both to this use of creativity and this use of like, give me a problem that I can figure out, as well as how can I make as large of an impact on my community as possible.
It sounds like your vision is growing with every new step that you take. Like it started off like, I'm going to go down this road and do this. And then you kind of get good at that or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, now I've done that. So maybe this. And it's kind of opening up. Do you find that to be the case?
To a degree, absolutely. While at the same time, what you probably don't know is that the path has always been consistent. So the goal has always kind of been the same. Ultimately, I've always wanted to be in an area of universal design and be taken seriously as a professional in this space. But I needed to learn so much, and the more opportunities I had, the more kind of pathways that I followed, the more I gained experience and a knowledge base that just kind of like adds to this magical ability to figure it out. Not to like toot my own horn or something, but
But I mean, like in many ways, it's like if you're to look at, the different roles that you've taken on, on paper, it would appear kind of disconnected, and to a certain degree, you have had to do a lot of different things and change tack, even though that there is like, because often looking back on our lives and how we've arrived to certain places and the clarity that we begin to get about like, okay, like, it's like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Is this what I want to be doing? Oh no, this isn't really what I want to be doing. I really want to be moving into this. But I mean, that is such a scary thing to change course. Like honestly, like for someone like yourself, like you've had really, like positions with organizations and that people would be like, what? Like you walked away from that? Like you stopped doing that? Are you crazy? But you've done it. And I want to know a little bit about that situation. Like how do you face that change and know that you're going to land on your feet somehow?
oh, that's an interesting question. It's interesting because I don't see myself as someone who deals well with change. In fact, so I grew up in Montreal. I moved here 13 years ago. And that was the biggest change of my life. And it was so scary. But I needed to do it because I felt like I didn't deal well with change. So I just kind of shoved myself off the deep end. And figured it would be okay, had a backup plan. And I think that there's nothing I could do that's scarier than that. Taking just this giant leap of faith. And in fact, I think the term leap of faith has been a core piece of my vocabulary for a long time. And to some degree, it is, I guess, trusting myself, breathing through the inevitable panic attack that usually comes with a decision of that magnitude. But more so, I think every change I've made has actually addressed a deep unhappiness that I felt. And it's not so much it was trusting myself that I could be happier, I could be healthier, I could contribute more. And if it didn't work out, I've always just figured it out. There's usually a backup plan in the back of my mind. But then it's kind of honestly come down to trust myself, trust the universe, and this too shall pass. If I'm anxious, if I'm fearful, if I know what at various points in my life I knew the situation I was in and how I felt, and I always was looking for how I could feel better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. It's kind of the classic, like, toward motivation, away from motivation, and I think Evan and I have been talking about this a lot recently, that, sometimes you need to have like a purpose or some reason or some desire to some carrot to chase, so to speak, that you want to go and you want to get. And sometimes you need, like something scary, like the fire under your ass or something like that, or something that's not making you happy to get yourself up and moving. It sounds like you kind of had a mix of both, a kind of a recognition that I'm not happy here. This isn't working. I want this. I don't know necessarily if I can get it, but it's better than staying here. And that kind of seems to be enough to get you to like take a step. And then your worldview sounds like leap of faith. It just sounds like, okay, well, I'm going to take that step. I don't know if there's going to be any ground underneath me when I do it, but let's see what happens. And I think maybe you do that enough, you start to go like, okay, well, there's ground the last 7 times, so why not the 8th, And then it starts to look like confidence.
And a little bit of fake it until you make it goes a long way.
Yeah.
No, it's you're 100% right. It's and I find for myself often it's the timing just appears to be perfect. I never leave an opportunity without another opportunity coming my way. Often I feel like I've manifested it. I still remember the first time I saw the Variety Show of Hearts telethon sign. It was hanging at one of the SkyTrain stations, and I was like, I'm going to work there. I'm going to be part of that at some point. And a few years went by, and I gained the skills, and there I was helping produce the 50th anniversary telethon event. And it just, yeah, it's a mixture of trust and, like you said, anytime I'm met with challenge, I feel like I've experienced challenge before. I know how to flow through it. I have surpassed it before. I can do it again. This is not going to be that different. And that maturity and growth, it kind of all sort of parcels together with an incredible support system. And good friends who listen and provide support and guidance. And I just always know that I'm working towards something greater, I guess.
I think what do you think's changed since the start? Like since the beginning of this journey of, making changes. I mean, I'm sure it started when you were really young, and maybe there was a key moment for you where, the very first time you took a big leap. I mean, now you're getting, I don't know, a little more confident at it. You kind of know the ropes a little bit more, right? Which I think is what everybody wants. They want to get to that place where they're like, it's not like you're not scared, but you have some data to back it up. What do you think's changed for you? Like, what do you think the you now knows that the you who started this journey didn't know?
I just that hmm, you've got me
Sound of a
really
that's the sound of a
thinking.
good question.
It's the sound of a good question. Um, I think I've learned to trust myself, and I've seen the truth of that it's all going to be okay come to light more often than not. I mean, realistically, I was the kid that cried at sleepovers because I wanted to go home. I was scared, and I think at some point I, like I said, I shoved myself off a cliff and I moved across the country, and nothing could be harder than that, and trust the process. Um, Confidence is certainly something I've gained and through many trials and tribulations. And I think also just learning to be a lot more present, letting go of a lot of worries. Um, and a lot of the health practices I've put in place, I think have made me feel a lot more grounded, um, as well as perhaps more intuitive and just kind of understanding of even when I feel stressed and scared, it's part of a process. And inevitably, that process benefits me. Um, and faking confidence is often easy for me. I can pretend really well, and Google's my best friend in terms of figuring things out. Sometimes it's I don't know but it's I say this with confidence while at the same time, I sit here, I'm pregnant, I'm about to be a mom in 2 months and face the biggest challenge and change of my life. On one hand, I feel incredibly prepared, and on the other hand, completely terrified. And I've had those moments of like, I can't go back. I literally cannot go back. There is no return on this. And it's kind of with everything. I just assume that it I assume that the next step will be filled with joy, and if not, then we'll find a way to make it so.
You have you've brought up a bunch of different a bunch of different things that like I'm finding incredibly useful, just in a very practical sense. I don't know, like there are certain things that are just sort of laid out in your story, and some of the things that you're commenting on, Brandon, as well. This sort of image of the fire under your ass and like the carrot, or so to speak, like there's this fire and there's this possibility, which seems like it makes it look like a very simple decision, which which it isn't necessarily. But I also wanted to, like, when you actually look at it in sort of a very simple way, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Do you want it, like, there's this fire here, there's this pain that you're experiencing and this heat that you're feeling about this path that you're on. So you can stay there in the fire, or there's this possibility that's out there. But there's no guarantees with that possibility at the same time. But it seems interesting to me that, you have this very pragmatic sense of, okay, well, what, like, your sort of backup plan, and, in sort of the artist world, you hear a lot of people say, it's like, you can't have a backup plan. You can't.
Well, honey,
like,
I have a backup plan for my backup plans.
yeah. But like, for me, I'm just like, I'm kind of re-seeing this right now, that it's like, a backup plan isn't necessarily because you are planning to fail. Your backup plan is really like saying, well, let's say I go after this and the worst thing happens. Like the worst outcome happens where this doesn't work out. How would I respond? Like, what would that actually mean? What would that actually look like? And is that thing actually so terrible that I couldn't come back from it? And it seems like, again, I'll figure it out, right? Like there's this thing, and it seems to have something that's been very true for you in your life.
It certainly served me well. And I guess I'm also just ever the pragmatic optimist. I've been fired. That was terrible. But I learned a lot from it, and it opened a whole host of new opportunities for me. And I think I really have just tried to look at my past and look at anything that I've been through or any challenge I've faced and find where the pattern of learning and growth has come from. So that has kind of created a map for me going forward. That again, it's as I said earlier, if I survived all of those past challenges, I can survive what comes before me. And even if it is hard and it's difficult and it's the wrong decision, I will gain something from it. And whether I know it in that moment in time or I only upon reflection, there's always momentum to go forward. No matter how challenging it is, no matter how stressful or scary or whatnot. And in some respects, it almost becomes empowering when you can face those fears and those challenges. Because I know I've certainly looked in the mirror and just been like, yes, I did that. That was so hard, and I did it. And I kind of take so much pride in those moments. And I don't know if you remember, Evan, there was an event that I worked on years ago. It's called Boat for Hope. We took 450 kids and their parents out for this like pirate adventure in False Creek on these yachts, and it was like a treasure hunt. It was wonderful, and we put this carnival together afterwards. And all 450 kids had various special needs and disabilities. Biggest challenge of my life, and I have a photo of myself looking like The Walking Dead, but I was so exhausted and so stressed, and I held up my binder, and that was my accomplishment. It was the night before. It was like, I'm ready. I got this. I've worked through all of this, and tomorrow I can have pizza, beer, and sleep for the next 3 days, and it'll be wonderful. But I purposely took a photo of myself in what quite honestly was the most stressed out, challenging, fatiguing moment of my life, knowing that I would always have this sort of image of I accomplished that, and no matter how challenging it was, like, I don't know, I take this weird pride in that moment. Because the next day was amazing and it was so much fun, but I had to go through that level of difficulty and recognize that to be able to recognize what the accomplishment was that accompanied it.
There's definitely something very important about celebrating these things. Like not only just celebrating the accomplishment of what you did, but there's something that I find so wonderful about, taking sort of an in some ways an unromantic, photo of yourself with a binder, like in the max of your stress. It's like, it's a recognition of something that you did, something that you went through, something that was hard. Like, we should celebrate the things that were hard, that we made it through, that we saw through to the other side. And I think that's something as human beings is that, like, I don't think we celebrate ourselves nearly enough, or each other for that matter. But like, ourselves, we have maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I can very easily, overlook or downplay my successes, and not really recognize, how extraordinary something, that I created or did actually was, or what it took to do it and get there, to even have the courage to pursue it in the first place. There's all of these things that we can celebrate, and I just wanted to comment that, like, I just appreciate that sort of act and ritual of sort of celebration that you bring into your life.
Thank you. I think it comes from a place of need, in all honesty. I come from a background in a place of very low confidence, very low self-perception, very low self-esteem, high anxiety, never quite feeling good enough. I think that's a similar story that many people can kind of echo. and developed these wonderful people in my life who saw my accomplishments and my ability to contribute and were constantly there to build me up. And at some point or another, I just realized like I wouldn't tolerate my friends speaking to me the way that I do sometimes. So why do I tolerate doing that to myself? And I love celebrating my friends' accomplishments, my husband's accomplishments. Like I'll throw him a dinner party. We used to have a tradition of every month we would buy a bottle of sparkling wine, champagne, whatever, and we would find something that month to celebrate. And as we've continued that ritual, we found more and more things to celebrate, whether they were small or large. And I think that just created, like you said, this ritual of let's recognize what we're doing and what we're contributing and what we're overcoming, and whether we do that for each other as friends. And I think I guess I didn't really realize until you mentioned it that I do that for myself. I think that I always saw it more as a anxiety mitigation strategy than anything else, really. That kind of that brings me great joy. Thank you for pointing that out. That's really a lovely compliment, I guess. It's I think recognition of how far I've come in my own self-perception.
Well, I think it points to just actually, how important it is for all of us. I think because I agree, because otherwise, if like to celebrate is maybe one of the most incredible things that we do as human beings, especially collectively together. Like I imagine the celebration that we're going to have when we're past this COVID thing.
All the hugs.
I was thinking about that just yesterday, like really picturing like, wow, when we're finally given the go ahead to like, you can go and be in public spaces together without masks, and you don't have to socially distance from each other. Like we're all just going to look at each other like, holy shit, like what did we just go through? And now we're back to like we can be with each other again. Like I feel like it's just going to be such an incredible celebration that we have, that just illustrates this whole thing of like, yeah, this was something that was hard that we went through. It's not necessarily like an accomplishment in the way we might normally think of as an accomplishment, but it's something extraordinary nonetheless.
Absolutely. I've thought about that so many times, like the party we can throw, the events that we can go back to, the challenging, crazy, stressful event that I can put on again. But more importantly, that being able to come back together and just being friendlier and more connected with each other again, I think it is something. And in essence, I think there will be a celebration, not just sort of in the traditional sense, but I really do look forward to those conversations of what was it like for you? What did you go through? What were your insights? What did you learn? What did you gain? And I think we're all still sort of processing that until we have this moment of kind of normalcy, if you can call it that we'll have again. It is weird. As much as I look forward to the gatherings and the big events, I really look forward to those conversations of reflection and finding out how people grew through all of this, because you can't not grow, you can't not change. It's impacted us for 10 months. We're all different. Yeah, and counting by the time this airs,
Have you read that book, Man's Search for Meaning?
No, I have not.
It's about what's the author's name again, Evan?
Viktor Frankl.
That's right. And it's about surviving a Nazi concentration camp and his experiences and everybody and what they went through. And I think in a time like this, I think it's, it's good that you guys are looking at it that way. I think sometimes people don't always look at it that way. Adversity makes or breaks you, right? And I think that the most interesting thing to me, as I'm learning more about your story, is every bit of adversity you had, you decided to let it make you. and not everybody does that. And I think that that's kind of a wisdom and an insight that needs to be passed on. I feel like that's what people need to hear. They need to hear, like, you went through this hard time, but what could you make of that? What did that teach you? How have you become better? Because a lot of people will use adversity to actually tear themselves down, and they'll get themselves into a funk or, depression, this type of thing. Right. And, I think that sometimes when events happen that are so overwhelming, like this COVID and stuff like that, for a lot of people, they're overwhelming. I'm curious, Karin, what would be your advice? When you've gone through your hardest times, right, and you felt down and out, and you felt like things were major adversity, right? What pushed you through? How did you make sense of that so that you could go through the fire and come out the other side? Because you continually take steps in a positive direction, but that's not an accident. I think that's a philosophy and a mindset and a decision that you're making internally.
I think it's one that I've developed after choosing the alternative. I have been curled in a ball, crying, filled with depression. At the beginning of COVID, I was having multiple panic attacks a week. And realistically, when I have felt at my worst, I kind of, at one point or another, looked inward and said to myself, well, I have two options. I can choose to remain curled in a ball, letting everything absorb me and not being able to face the world. And that is one option. Or I can make another choice and find step by step a way out of this. And I think, at the times where I have been at my lowest and where truly I haven't wanted to get out of bed and the panic attacks just kind of roll in one after another, like waves hitting a beach. It is a very, very challenging and in some respects courageous decision to face that, to look at it, and to start deciding that I don't want to feel that way and I don't want to give in to the adversity. And the more I've practiced that approach, the more familiar it becomes. So I haven't been in that dark hole ever again. I may feel it approaching and decide to look the other way and say, no, that doesn't need to be my truth. I don't need to be there. I can allow myself those moments for sure. We're all human, my goodness. But it's a conscious decision that I want to be healthy and hopeful and optimistic and bring my best to be able to be there for everyone else, I guess, in many respects. But yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I've certainly never been in that place of just letting the overwhelming feelings take hold, because that certainly is a part of my truth and my past. That didn't serve me. It wasn't really helpful, even though it perhaps helped me learn strength to work through it and in many respects acceptance of that part of who I am. But if you were to ask me today and something challenging were to hit, like, yes, I'd probably have a little breakdown and, we'd have a little moment, we'd move on. And then tomorrow I'd say, okay, like, let's figure this out. We can move forward. We can learn from this. We can continue the process of change that put us through. And I'm choosing to not sit in a ball in a corner and stay there. I want to get up.
I mean, thanks a lot for sharing that. I just want to say that because I think there's so many people out there who are experiencing that, and you sharing that you have gone through a challenge I think it's helpful to people. I think it's important for people to realize that, like, even the most successful people, even people who are they're kicking ass right now, or whatever, whatever you see doesn't mean that they got here to that place with just total ease. Like it didn't all work out. It wasn't all just lovey-dovey like roses, you know, and it was thorns, you know, there was difficult times. And I just want to say I appreciate you sharing that. You know, there was a moment where I was over with your other half, Marco. I was over at your place, and you and Marco, I was telling you a bit about what I was struggling with, and you guys just, we were having a great conversation, but you guys took a moment and you kind of reframed it, and you're like, yeah, but look who you are, look who you've become, look at this, look at that, and just, you just gave me all this ammunition, you know, to go back out and attack that, you know, from a powerful place. And I think that it's, you know, there's a philosophy there, there's a mindset. It's like, well, let's not look at how this destroyed us, let's look at how this built us, let's look at how it made us better. And I think the big thing that I walked away from that conversation, among many things, was that I'm better, I'm more prepared. So no matter what happened around me, no matter what was going on in the external world, no matter how plans didn't go to plan or whatever, that I was more prepared for the next step. And I just think it's great that we're getting this opportunity to hear a little bit that, you know, that you didn't learn that from just having it all work out smoothly.
No. And I don't think you can.
Yeah.
Realistically, like if you don't recognize those moments of tribulation and have somebody help you put that into perspective, you can't recognize, you can't, I wouldn't be able to have this perspective. You know, like it took pulling myself off the ground to understand actually how I want to move forward. And you know, it is this opportunity. It's like, if I could survive that, like, I got this.
I think that we could all, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go please.
I was going to say, I'm like, I feel like there's just this thing that's emerging, and it's like, I think that we could all use a little bit of Karin philosophy of I can figure it out. Yeah. Like, it's like, that happens, you'll figure it out. But what if this? You'll figure it out. Like, if like you can figure it out. You know, like, I think that that's just there's something so simple and so powerful about that, like, you know, it's one of those things where I've heard you say this before and I'm like, yeah, that's good. But, you know, like, when you really sink your teeth into what that really means on a bigger scale, it's, you know, like we've talked about on the show, like, you know, you are more capable than you think you are. And that in many ways, that's kind of what life is all about, is learning continually that you are more than you think you are, and you are more capable than you think. And I feel like that this sort of thing, like, I can figure it out, is like, it touches upon that a beautiful wisdom there that can give us courage, which I think is like sorely needed. You know, like, we need courage to live in the world, you know, to live fully in the world, and to bring who we are out for everyone to see. Like, there's tremendous courage that's involved with that. And I think that I can figure it out is like a terrific mantra that can for people to use to, like, go and have that courage.
Maybe it needs to be my next tattoo.
Or a book.
You know, once I make some time in my life for something like that.
You know what? That's, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just have to say this while we're here. That's such good advice for a kid. You know, you're going through a challenge, and tell your kid, you can figure this out, you know, because I feel like that's such an important thing for people to realize, is so much of this life, we can feel helpless. And when you're encouraged and inspired to just say, hey, you can figure this out. Like, if you want to, you can figure it out. And I think that's important for people to recognize, because I think there's a lot of times where we feel helpless and we feel stuck. And it's like, who do you need to talk to? Who do you need to ask? What do you need to do? Like, and if you want to, there is a way. And it's not just when you're going through trouble. It's like, if you have a big goal, like a big dream, you can figure this out. You know, it's just it's like a good cornerstone direction.
Yeah, I love this conversation so much because for me, the I can figure it out came truly from such a pragmatic, logical place, whether it was like a physical environment problem or um, I don't know, not wanting to like hire somebody to do something for me because I just like take this pride in wanting to do it myself. And it just is like, yeah, no, I can figure this out. Like I take pride in physically figuring something out. And I think you're also helping me realize that I have truly applied that to life as a concept in a philosophical manner and even, to my own health and mental health in a way that I'm not sure that I fully recognized I was doing.
I'm glad you're
So
seeing
thank
that.
you for that.
I'm glad you're seeing that. I think it's Jim. I think it's Jim Ron. I think it was Jim Ron. One of the speakers I listen to all the time, and he was saying, or Zig Ziglar, but I'm pretty sure it was Jim. But he was talking about how, like, if you need a philosophy for life, that's one of the most important things you have to have. And I think a lot of people have a philosophy, but they don't realize what their philosophy is, but they have it regardless. They just never like articulated it and wrote it down or ever said it out loud. But I find it fascinating that we've stumbled across this because it is such a good cornerstone of your philosophy, which it's awesome. It started out as something simple and kind of direct and pragmatic, but it actually became kind of a way, and this is, way of the artist, right? Like this is finding a way, and an artistic, creative way. You can figure this out. It's such a great way to do life.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're noticing things.
I hope somebody listening maybe benefits and internalizes that idea because yeah, you can figure it out. We have the means.
I think that you could take a strip out of your husband's book. Like as much as you would probably absolutely hate this, like I can picture you on stages in front of massive amounts of people, and it's just like you got the music. It's like the Tim Robbins like music blaring, and people are just like, oh, I don't know if I can. And then you're just like, you can do it. And they're like, I don't know. It's like, you can do it. You can figure it out. You can figure it out. You can figure it out.
I'm like,
and people
Tony
are just like amped. They're just like, yes, I can. I can.
I appreciate your confidence in me. I think there is a version of me in another universe who will take you up on that idea.
Excellent.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I don't think it. I think it's fun. It's fun to like joke about that, and I don't think everybody who takes on a really great philosophy has to be like Tony Robbins. They don't have to be out there saying like, that was his journey, and yours is maybe a little bit different. Your approach is maybe different, but nonetheless, I do think people will benefit because as I'm in this conversation, I'm benefiting. I'm reminded, there's a certain amount of, and that's where I think faith comes in, is that you have to go like, if things go wrong, that doesn't matter because I'll figure it out, and if things go wrong again, I'll figure it out. And something I realized like several years ago was that, there really is nothing to fear because if things go wrong, I'm going to keep redirecting to wherever it is I want to go, unless I decide to get off that track, right? Like nothing's going to knock me off. So it doesn't really matter how far off track I get by disappointments or failures or things not going to plan, because like you said early in this conversation, the direction was always the same. Like when I asked you about vision, you're like, no, it was always really the same. It's just that you came at it from different ways as it evolved. And I feel like that's kind of the I can figure it out approach. It's like, well, I was going to do it this way, but that didn't work out. So now I'm doing it this way, and maybe this will work out. And maybe it'll open up an opportunity for another way, which I don't see yet. But at the same point, you're always kind of looking to where you want to go, regardless of what happens.
Yes.
I love it. It's just like,
Yeah.
We're supposed to have her talking, and we're just like,
I don't have anything to add. That's wonderful. I appreciate the conversation and insights. It's interesting.
Well, let's change tack here quickly because I wanted to make sure that we covered this. Um, so why don't you tell everybody what an accessibility and universal design specialist does, and also why this is what has your attention at this point in your life right now.
This is the conversation I thought we were going to have today.
It all comes around.
It does. And ultimately the vein of I can figure it out is kind of what got me here.
Isn't it better with this context, though, now that you're talking about it? Like this context, this conversation before you share this?
Sure.
Don't try and force it, Brandon.
So accessibility and universal design. Accessibility, it speaks to the world of people with disabilities. So my role and what I like to do primarily is create environments, events, products, whatnot that work for people of all abilities. So if you think so universal, I'll tell you what universal design is, and then I'd love to give you just kind of an example as to kind of how it's differentiated in my mind. Universal design is the concept that an event or product can be created in such a way that it works for all people of all backgrounds, sizes, cultures, abilities, and disabilities. And it's kind of inherently useful for everyone, as opposed to accessibility, which generally includes accommodation. So to think about that pragmatically, if a building is accessible, we call ahead, we find out if it's accessible. They're like, yep, we got a ramp. Like, great, you've slapped a ramp on the front of the building. I can get in the door with Marco. Marco being my husband, who happens to use a wheelchair. So universal design means that all of us can walk in the entrance together, can enjoy the entire environment together. There doesn't need to be someone shuffling about for us to find a lower seat that works for him, that there isn't this sense of need of accommodation. It's just kind of inherently there. And for me, and Brandon, you probably don't know this about me, one of my favorite things in the entire world is beautiful functional design. And whereas accessibility is really making something work for somebody that needs an adaptation or an accommodation, universal design it just works. It creates a sense of community. It creates this allowance in the space that everyone can participate fully and be seen. And I think it's really, really poignant right now, especially given everything going on in the world. We've all been through a lot, and like you mentioned earlier with COVID, there's just the sense of community that is created out of universal design because we can all participate together. We're not segregating people because of their abilities or disabilities. And, we understand that when something is kind of designed in such a way that works for everybody, it's also a little bit future-proof. So, as we age, as I now walk through a space with a baby under one arm and my other hand full of other stuff, I can use my elbows or whatever to open a door. And for me, I think it's this passion it's kind of come from this place of wanting to include everybody. And my other life philosophy is really, people are people, treat people like people. And when we design for all people, then we're seeing each other represented, and we're engaging with each other, and we're learning from each other and having opportunities for authentic connections. And it's kind of my entire life has been a passion towards supporting people with disabilities ultimately. And this way, with this lens, I can actually create spaces and places where everyone is just naturally welcome. And maybe that sounds a little idealistic, but it's possible, and it can be beautiful and functional all at the same time, because Especially in the disability world, there's this tendency of things being really medical. And that is alienating for people. That is psychologically uninclusive.
Just quickly,
yeah.
can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by medical?
Okay, so I do have permission to share this story. I asked Marco ahead of time. So Marco uses a wheelchair. And early on when we were dating, I found out that he was showering by sitting on the floor of our shower. And I thought there's kind of no dignity in that. I asked him why he's doing that. And he just kept saying, well, shower benches look really medical. They look like something your 85-year-old grandfather used after he had a stroke. And that's what, the pharmacy sold him. And they're plastic and they kind of scream adapted or I need help or, they have a very negative stigma. And he flat out refused to use one of these benches. And that's kind of almost in a way where this idea of universal design kind of triggered for me. And I was like, you know what? I'll figure it out. Do you trust me to find you something that will work? And I promise you will look good. And he kind of shrugged it off and he was like, if you can, watch me. And I went and I bought this beautiful teak wood spa bench that you would find in an upscale spa, or you would find in someone's high-end bathroom. And I brought it home and that was his Christmas gift that year. And now if you come over, we just have this beautiful bench that sits in his shower. And nobody really puts two and two together that that's for him. It helps me. It makes it easier to shave my legs, just saying. But when his parents are here, they kind of use it. And other people seem to like to use it. And it looks beautiful. So it doesn't alienate Marco and doesn't highlight a need that he has, but rather just is almost a feature, if that makes sense. And I think that to me is kind of part of the process, is how can we create worlds where we feel included, we don't feel separated from each other, we don't feel as though our differences are highlighted, but rather integrated.
That's great.
Just from a shower bench.
Yeah. Well, I imagine there's probably, a lot of ladies out there who go, hey, that would be much better to shave my legs with this nice, beautiful bench in the shower or whatever. And it's I think what's great about this, what you're doing, is that it works for somebody regardless of whatever their situation is. And I was just thinking as you're talking, I was like, if you had to do parkour to get into a place, only the best athletes would be able to get in there. You know what I mean? And it would make the rest of us feel like, man, I'm not capable of doing that. I got to leap across these things. And it's kind of like our culture is a little bit like that right now. We're a little bit we assume that everybody's just in perfect health, perfect condition, and if you're not, then somehow it's noticeable. And it's what if you get a back injury? What if you sprain your ankle? What if whatever? And these type of adaptations to our world, they make it just seamless. So it's well, it doesn't really matter, it's all just flow.
It's exactly. And I kind of love that, in the sense of, I feel like we're also moving past just let's adapt something. Oh, we have enough people that utilize a walker coming into this facility, so we need to adapt this. I will like to help communities move towards a place where the building is it's so naturally, beautifully, functionally designed that you're not even noticing what the adaptions are. That we all can just kind of participate, and there are the features that work for all of us. And, whether we have a disability, or whether we're a senior, or we have an acquired disability, or however that works, or whether you're just tired that day, like, or like right now I've got, so with pregnancy comes sometimes carpal tunnel syndrome. So I actually have very little feeling in my right hand. And it's this new thing that I'm experiencing, and it's going to go away in a few months. But I'm noticing just how challenging that new feature of my body appears to be to me right now. But it's just kind of highlighting these moments and these opportunities to how can we improve design? How can we make something better? And often it's these questions are approached with challenge. Ah, see, now I know where you're circling back to our previous conversation, Brandon. I see how you set me up.
I promise you it wasn't intentional.
No, of course not. So a lot of people see it's like, oh, accessibility is this like big, expensive challenge. And that's where I kind of approach it as like, no, like this is just a cool problem to be solved. And all you need is a bit of creativity and insight and community, and we can come up with a better way and a better way of being together.
I'm seeing it's like a kind of quality with how we're addressing these situations, because like in the classes that I teach when I'm working with actors, like one of my mantras to them is embrace everything, deny nothing. And in many ways, what you're saying to me makes me think it's like, yeah, like there's an attitude of this plastic, white and metal bench or whatever that says like, okay, there's a problem, let's deal with it. As opposed to, hey, there's a problem, let's embrace it. Let's embrace the problem and come up with something that's, that's beyond just trying to deal with something, slapping a Band-Aid on something and being like, there, we did our job.
Yep.
Like there's a different quality entirely in the attitude with how we confront challenges. It's like, are we just dealing with the challenge, which sometimes dealing with the challenge means kind of like, for some people and in some situations, it means actually not even really dealing with it. Sometimes it's kind of dismissive, as opposed to fully embracing the challenge. Does that ring anything for you? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I take great pleasure in addressing the challenge. I don't want to just deal with it. I don't want to just do the bare minimum and be like, see, there you go, it works. No, it should be beautiful and artistic and thoughtful and mindful and inclusive and engaging. There's these challenges are just such great opportunities for us to do better and to do something more beautiful or more functional or however that looks. And then it creates these opportunities for the changes in thought patterns and for kind of empowering other people. Because, as I've seen in this current role that I have, is the more these changes happen, the more it actually inspires other people. And this thought pattern sort of helps to change this way of thinking of, we can do better than the minimum. We can do better than just putting a Band-Aid solution. And it's actually easy to start thinking in a new way and embracing these physical challenges, as you would say, like with veracity and opportunity. It's a really interesting one because it does have this great sort of thoughtful psychological effect that it creates for people and perhaps inspires some creativity as well.
The thing that I'm kind of seeing is what you're going for, in my opinion, is like that seamlessness where you don't see the seams, you don't see how everything's stitched together. It's like, that's the thing I don't think we always think about when we think about art. Art is seamless when it's done well. It takes something medical and it turns it into something that's not only functional, but like enjoyable and natural, and like these things all come together. And you kind of skip the part of like, yeah, this thing's here because someone needs to sit down in the shower. Now it's like, hey, I'd like to sit down in the shower. Hey, I'd like
Sounds
to,
lovely.
yeah. You know what I mean? Like, hey, washing your feet while you're standing in the shower, like, especially if you have a tub, right? It's such a pain in the ass because you could slip, you could fall, whatever, right? I mean, how many times would it be nice to just sit down, wash your feet properly, and get back up and then do the rest of your shower? Like, if you have that option. But if it's like a very seamless part of your whole bathroom experience, as one example of probably an infinite number, if you grew up with that, you would wonder why it wasn't in every bathroom. You know what I mean? You would wonder why wouldn't you have that? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even make sense not to have it. And at the same time, it makes it totally inclusive. And, and I think, like, I'm thinking about filmmaking, right? Like, filmmaking, you don't want people to notice your shots. You don't want them to notice what you're doing. And there's a magic to that because it keeps everything in the flow of, the story you're in. And when that term you said, medical, that's like when you see the shot, in film. That's like when you see it, that you see the seams, you see the thing that was put there. And it's like, it could be an eyesore, or it could just draw you out of the whole experience that you're in, right?
That's a great analogy. Great analogy. I love that.
Well, what you don't know,
you didn't
Karin,
know what you might have to say about art, Karin.
is while you're here talking, I'm just observing you and breaking you down.
Okay.
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turns out you're actually a filmmaker in disguise.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty handy with photography, but maybe film is a skill yet to be figured out.
But they all parallel. Like, what you do
Totally.
parallels with what I'm doing, parallels with what Evan's doing. And I think that's the really cool thing about artistry. I think one of the big things that I've really wanted to kind of, I don't know, embark upon with this podcast was just how art is in everything. It's not just like, you don't have to just be an artist. Like, you don't have to just paint or make music or something for art to actually matter in your life. And I think, like, one of the things you're really doing is demonstrating that art comes in many forms, and it's a more of a mentality and a philosophy of approach. So that's cool.
That fascinates me, as I have never allowed myself to see myself as an artist. So again, thank you for that.
Well, I think we often have very limited, we kind of have a limited scope of what we think of as being art. But in general, I think that I said this to you when, we were setting you up to come on the podcast, and I said, if you are passionate about what you do, then there's an opportunity to make it artful. If you've got passion, you can turn what you do into an art. And people might not see it that way or recognize it that way, but it doesn't make it any less true.
And since you said that to me, I had been reflecting on that, and you're absolutely right. There is an art to it, and I've seen this concept done incredibly poorly, and in such a way that's created more problems than it solved. Just seriously, people trying to do things for the sake of solving a problem, and not actually thinking through the process. So there is an intellectual component, but absolutely there's an art to it. And I think, I hope that it does in many respects combine this love of, beautiful functional design that I have. And then something that you said, Brandon, kind of struck me as well, that if we'd had that shower bench in my home growing up, I would have assumed that everybody had one in their home growing up. And in many respects, that's kind of what happened to me. So, my father is this like genius sort of engineer brain, and he's always just coming up with these interesting solutions around the house. And we had this, in my childhood home, we had this large picture window with this big roller blind. And the only way to move it up and down would be to climb on the couch and like awkwardly pull it down. So my dad, being the, kind of maker before makers were cool, type of person, he engineered this little like switch. I think like before I was born. So he created this up and down switch for the roller blind. And I just had it my entire childhood. And to me, that was the most normal thing in the entire universe. Like, I remember going as a child to someone else's home and I was like, what do you mean you don't have one of those little switchy things that make it go up and down? It just makes your life so much easier. Like,
Yeah.
isn't not actually realizing that what he had done was thinking outside of the box and kind of out of the ordinary. And like, I remember that so vividly of like, oh, shouldn't we all just have one of these little switchy boxes?
Totally.
And we should. I feel like now that's what many of the tech companies are taking on. And yet, my dad is OG and figured that out before I was born.
Do we want to take, because I'm usually the one who's keeping an eye on the clock here, and
always with the time, Evan.
Always with the time. I know.
But
I know.
Let's talk about beer.
Let's talk about
drinks or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have nothing to report from because I'm doing a sober January. But Brandon, I know you've got one, and Karen, I know you've got a non-alcoholic something going on there. So
yeah,
take it away.
Well, I'll just start. This one, I don't know, Lowenbrau, I think it's called Lowenbrau Original, a premium beer. It's a German style beer. I honestly don't know. It's just light, and it's delicious. Anyway, that's what it is. That's what I decided to have today, and it's been going down real quick. So that's probably a good sign.
Good. I've had that one. It's a good one. I like it. I feel very peculiar right now because I'm drinking a non-alcoholic beer, but it's kind of challenging me a little bit because it feels like I'm doing something that I shouldn't. But I'm really enjoying Red Racer's Street Legal. It's a Pilsner, and it does not taste like a non-alcoholic beer. It's very, very tasty. Supporting local and pretending that I'm drinking regular beer is a good place to be.
I'm super interested in maybe searching that out and trying it because I remember like back in the day, like in acting class and scene study where, you needed props and, it's frowned upon to drink, actually drink alcohol on stage, and it's like for good reason. But like,
you have
I remember
a few too many takes and
yeah, but I mean, like, I remember like having to like buying these non-alcoholic beers from the grocery store and just like drinking these things
they were
and being
awful.
Like, oh, they're so bad. They were so terrible. Ugh.
And and they're so gassy too. Like you try to say your line and you just like, you have like this, the bubbles were so harsh. You're just like, man, I want to burp on stage.
No, this is good.
Yeah.
This is super good. It tastes like a nice Pilsner.
Shout out to Red Racer.
Shout out to Red Racer. I appreciate the beer that I can pretend is beer while I'm pregnant.
Nice. That sounds like a commercial.
The optics of that might be a little bit strange, but
yeah. Well, that's what we'll quote you on. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
I was gonna say, I'm sure that there are many other pregnant women out there, and mothers past who are just like, no, you do it. Don't you feel bad about that for a second?
Right. It's the psychological flip that I have to get over because like I'm tasting beer and I have to remind myself that I'm not like doing something terrible. I think like one beer would be fine, but still, it's just, I want to be safe. I want to take some chances, I got like one shot to do this right.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, we got some questions for you.
Yes,
okay.
Indeed.
The
jumped on it, Evan.
Okay, scary questions.
Scary questions. I'm gonna go first. I decided.
He has declared that he is going first.
All right. Are you ready, Karen?
No.
Ready for this? All right. Well, let's wait.
No.
You didn't think I'd do that, did you?
I'm just being cheeky. Yeah, I didn't expect you to call me on it.
All right. What's the most important book you've ever read?
The most important book I've ever read. Oh, there's countless. Um, I don't know that I can answer that. That seems to like depend on the month, the year. Um, you should have let me prepare for these. I really want to just go into the other room and look at my bookcase and make a decision.
Well, what comes to mind? What's something that landed with you?
Um, I don't know why, but a book I would certainly recommend is it's a novel called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And it's a story that features a youth who has autism, and he solves what he believes to be a crime about a dog. And it is an exceptionally well written story that puts you in a very different perspective and kind of taking it it shifted my way of thinking and sort of understanding how mm, perhaps it allowed me to take a bit of more of a walk in somebody else's shoes in a very engaging way. Oh, and the Celestine Prophecies. That's a life-changing book.
Awesome. You're allowed to
There's
say
my
more than
record.
one title.
Okay. Like if you let me keep going, there's going to be 20 more. But Celestine Prophecies is a book I believe that everyone should read.
Nice. I like the reaction to like the first book, because that's happened to a few people who they're just like, I don't know why, but this book, and there's just something about what comes out afterwards that I find so delightful.
It's a good question.
Your next question.
Oh,
One
is this
down.
on me? It's not like you don't
Yeah,
share as well.
You.
Oh, no,
You
no,
are
no,
the
no.
Focus.
No, this is all about you. We can't do this
okay.
every single episode
Yeah.
with ourselves. All right.
Fair.
What is a film that has made the greatest impact on you?
A film that's made the greatest impact on me. This is more challenging to me than a book. Because for those who don't know me very well, don't know that I often fall asleep during movies. Not that I'm not engaged, it's just I get really into it and then somehow end up falling asleep. Lately, biggest impact. Oh gosh, what's that movie called? They Live. They Live is a great 80s movie. And I will shout out to my husband for always ensuring that I watch a good 80s movie. But it is one that has sat with me, and the more I think about it, the more insights I get, and I highly recommend it. It's a weird, trippy movie, but I highly recommend it. I'll just leave it there.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I've never seen it, and I've seen a lot of movies.
Yeah, it's got one of the most epic fight scenes of all time, like to the point when you're like, how are they still fighting? Like it's been like 10 minutes. And it's hilarious, but it's also one of those things that is a perspective changing film, and I don't want to describe it for fear of either doing it disjustice or giving away too much. But it is an absolutely perspective changing film.
Cool.
With a ridiculous fight scene.
What's a song or an album that takes you somewhere?
A song or an album? I have a deep love of Great Big Sea, and any of their songs or albums just kind of take me to the East Coast of Canada and somehow into history. And there's a joyfulness and um, a lot of heart that I think a lot of albums miss. And I feel like, in knowing the two of you as well as I do, I'm kind of doing myself disjustice by saying that. And I should be saying like, oh, Pink Floyd or, like the White Album. But in truth, like that was my gut answer I love a good Great Big Sea album. They're so fun. I just want to go have a kitchen party in like Newfoundland and have a good time.
That's great. There's no judgment here.
Okay, good.
I think that's the beauty of music for me, is that like you don't necessarily have control over what it does to you. Yeah. It just does something to you. Your next question, we've now moved past the like media format questions.
Okay.
Where do you think creativity comes from?
Sorry, I know that dead air is not useful for you. I'm so sorry.
I feel like it's like I maybe like set you up. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I'm out of the woods now.
Yeah. Oh my God, like it's easier for me.
It's just you're getting deeper in the woods.
Oh, good. Where do I think creativity comes from? I think, I don't know. Part of me wants to say that it comes from your soul. And I don't really know what I mean by that. Because I think everybody is inherently creative. And I know personally people in my life who truly believe that they are not creative and they don't have creativity. But I think it's something that you recognize within yourself and perhaps foster. For me, I think creativity just comes from a need to solve problems. I'm getting kicked. That's why I'm looking a little funny. I think it's kind of like a muscle. It's something that you practice, and perhaps some people come into this world feeling more attached to the concept of creativity than others, but it's within all of us, and I think something that we can really foster within each other. So I'll stick with my original answer. I think it comes from deep within, and whether you call that your soul or your spirit or whatnot, it's in you.
How do you find inspiration?
I think it finds me. I don't really have a better answer for that. I know I just get hit with sometimes this idea of I want to create something or play in some sort of medium or solve a problem. I don't know how to find inspiration. Perhaps, from others that I admire. But I feel like sometimes inspiration just kind of attacks me out of nowhere. Usually when I'm looking for it, I can't find it. I start overthinking it.
But you receive it when it happens.
As best I can. Yeah. I try.
Nice.
Well, sometimes it goes a little haywire, but
Well, now we're going really deep into the woods, Karin, so get ready.
All right. What is one thing you would tell your childhood self?
You can figure it out. No token, like, I think my younger self you'll be okay. Every moment comes and goes, but really, I think you can figure it out. It seems like the right answer for this conversation.
All right. Final question.
Okay.
What would your future self tell you today?
I think my future self would tell me something very similar to what I would tell myself of 5 years ago or so. And something along the lines of, the journey continues and you don't know necessarily where it takes you, but it takes you in perfectly the right direction. And to continue to maintain a philosophy of optimism and looking at challenges with grace and the sense of being able to overcome anything that's put in your path, because there's more challenges ahead, but the journey continues in the right direction.
Beautiful.
How about you both? Do you get to answer these questions as well?
We answered a couple of them like a few episodes back, I think. Emma asked us those, like, she's like, well, what about you guys? And like, she kind of really put us on the spot with it too. So we didn't answer all of them, but we answered a couple of them.
Did anything change for you for that last one, Evan? Anything your future self might advise today?
Yeah, actually, because I was really thinking about it, and it was like, my future self would probably tell me, don't worry so much. It's gonna be all right. Yeah.
That's a solid piece of advice I think that we all need. Because worrying really does nothing. It serves no purpose. It's just
like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do. But it doesn't get you anywhere.
But it honestly, it is one of those things. I get caught in worrying all of the time. And every time I get myself out of that cycle, it's like, well, is that even useful? Like, did you prevent something terrible from happening by worrying? No, you just wasted your time and made yourself stressed out.
I remember when I was in my, when I went and did like a 10-day Vipassana meditation, and I remember there was like, I don't even remember what day it was that this happened, but like I just had this insight into my patterns of worry, where I was just like, well, it was just like, oh, I got all this worry. There's all this worry. I have like all of this pattern of worry in my life. And it's just like, well, obviously you think you're getting something from it. So what are you getting from it? Because otherwise you'd let it go. And it was just like, well, I worry because that's what makes me think will make me safe. Mm-hmm. Right? But then like in the moment I realized the insanity of that, because it's like, yeah, but the reason why you feel like you're unsafe is because you worry. Right? It was just like this weird sort of circle. And I was just like, so really it's just doing nothing whatsoever. Because the thing is like, what's making me feel unsafe is the worry itself. Very bizarre.
And my philosophy would help you out in that moment. Well, because I've done it to myself, right? I get into these cycles of worrying and I'm like, no, but if I don't worry about this, then nobody else is going to worry about this. And then if I will miss it and I won't think about it, and then something terrible is going to happen. So I have to worry about it. Or at least that's what goes on in my head sometimes. Yeah. And then I have tried to just tell myself, okay, what are your plans? So if you're worrying about this, what can you figure out to remediate it? And then I start telling myself all of the things that I can empower myself with. And then all of a sudden that little worrying voice just starts going away. And this like self-awareness and I can't think of the right word. This sense of grounding, I guess, it's just kind of more what takes over, and it's like, again, yeah, the worrying is not helpful in that moment. But if I focus on, if I'm worrying about something, what can I do to stop worrying about it or make myself feel comfortable? Because you're absolutely right. The worrying is a comfort blanket. It weirdly makes you feel safe and stressed out at the same time.
Yeah.
There you go. We're attempts at wisdom from Karin.
That's what we could like call. That's a potential like second name for this podcast. Attempts at wisdom.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's another book title right there.
Attempts at wisdom.
It's a good comedy.
And that would be a good sketch. You could do something really funny with that.
Well, do we have any final thoughts that anyone would like to share, reflecting on this conversation? What's anyone got? I mean, really, to me, I just the one, it's staring in the face. And for people who've been listening, and if you've listened to the show all the way to this point, you're like, I know exactly what this one's about. It's about the fact that you can figure it out. You will figure it out. And yeah, so I think that's just, I'll reiterate, I was making kind of a joke about you being some sort of, big inspirational, speaker on a stage with lights and music and masses of people. But I mean it in the sense that that is, I can figure it out is a sentiment that I think has just it's that powerful. I think that it's something that it is actually that powerful to move us into a place of courage and living our lives more fully. There's real wisdom and power in it. So you can figure it out, man. That's I don't know what else I could take away more than that from this conversation.
I would second that. I mean, obviously you can figure it out. And I would just double down on that, Evan. And I would also say, maybe take a moment and think about what your philosophy is in life, and I think it's great that Karin came on, and she didn't even realize that was a part of, probably a major part of her philosophy. But I think that, I think that if you really check in, probably deep down, there are things that you believe or you think about the world, and they can empower you. And I think something like this is a powerful philosophy to approach everything with. I'll figure it out. When I get to it, I'll figure it out. It's like acting, be in the moment. When you get to that next moment, you'll figure it out. You'll be in that moment, and I think that mitigates a lot of the worry that we have and a lot of the fear. And I would say, I was thinking about that question, about what I would tell myself today, my future self would say. And I would say, look for the things that you want to see in the world, and you'll find them. It's because when you're looking for that, you'll corner them out, and I think that, you'll figure it out is kind of cornering that out. It's like, well, what is the answer? You're going to corner that out, whatever you put your attention on. Because it's so easy to go well, what if this happens? And then what if this happens? And so I just take it even further. It's you'll figure it out, but bring that even to the next level. Well, how do you see the world? And how is that going to be a part of your doing the world?
I would like to thank you both. I have a lot of gratitude for this conversation, and I've gained a lot from just talking all of this through, and your insightful questions and perspective that I think I'm reflecting on and will be reflecting on for quite some time. So thank you both for this beautiful opportunity, and in many respects helping me recognize a very deep philosophy for myself that I think I brushed off a little bit at times, and perhaps did not realize the depth to which I embraced it. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.